Detroit's first black female mayor pulls a $225,000 salary, finished her campaign with $645,000 still in the bank, got checks from Samuel L. Jackson and Dan Gilbert's empire, and then married a youth sports manager 3 weeks after winning. I'm talking about Mary Sheffield, the woman who went from the youngest city council member ever to running an entire city. And she did it while dating a contractor who was cashing $18 million in city demolition checks. Big shout out to Ebony Cochran for putting this story on our radar. Let's take a deep insider look at how she made her way to the top as the first black woman to ever serve Detroit. Born into the game. Let's get one thing straight. Mary Sheffield didn't climb from absolute zero. She was already born into Detroit political royalty in 1987. And that matters because, in politics, your last name either opens doors or keeps them locked forever. Her grandfather, Horace Sheffield Jr., was a civil rights leader and labor organizer who actually moved the needle during Detroit's union heyday. Her father, Reverend Horace Sheffield III, has been a fixture in Detroit activism for decades. This is generational infrastructure, the kind of family network where you grow up knowing city council members by their first names and attending community meetings instead of soccer practice. Sheffield stacked credentials early. Bachelor's from Wayne State, Master of Public Administration from Central Michigan. Then, at 26, she became the youngest person ever elected to Detroit City Council in 2013. Most people are still figuring out how to file taxes at 26. Sheffield was already controlling city budgets and writing housing policy. Over the next decade, she chaired key committees, built a legislative record covering affordable housing and tax reform, and in 2022 became council president. Again, youngest ever. This wasn't luck or charisma alone. This was strategic positioning built on a family name that carries serious weight in Detroit's black community. The Sheffield name meant she could walk into rooms other candidates couldn't access and command respect that usually takes decades to earn. Fast forward to November 2025. Sheffield wins the mayoral race with 77% of the vote. A landslide so decisive it basically said Detroit wasn't just ready for a black woman mayor. They were ready for this specific black woman who'd been groomed for leadership since childhood. But winning elections costs money, serious money. And Sheffield's donor list reads like a masterclass in playing both sides of Detroit's economic divide. Buckle up, because here's where the story gets interesting. The $3 million question. Sheffield's mayoral campaign raised roughly $3 million, which makes it one of the most well-funded races in Michigan history. But the donor breakdown is where things get spicy, because she managed to collect checks from both grassroots activists and corporate titans simultaneously. A political tightrope most candidates fall off immediately. Dan Gilbert's Rock Holdings dropped $13,000 through a pass. The Detroit Pistons organization and vice chair, Arn Tellum's family, combined for about $43,250. Local real estate developers and law firms contributed around $18,235. These aren't small checks. These are institutional investments from people who expect access and influence in return. Then there's the celebrity angle. Samuel L. Jackson wrote a check. So did Cookie Johnson, Magic's wife, and author Michael Eric Dyson. Sheffield even held a fundraiser in Atlanta that pulled thousands from out-of-state donors, including a Georgia venture capitalist who dropped $2,500. By year-end 2024, she'd collected nearly $18,000 from non-Michigan donors alone. But here's the genius move. Sheffield also collected donations from Detroit teachers who gave literal single dollars. Neighborhood residents chipped in $5, $10, $25. Community activists contributed modest amounts. So when critics accused her of being bought by corporate interests, she could point to thousands of small donors and claim grassroots support. Politically, it's brilliant. Financially, it's complicated. Because when the campaign ended, Sheffield had $644,823 left over. Unspent. Just sitting there. Michigan law lets candidates keep that money or redirect it through nonprofits or political organizations. Her team even floated the idea of forming a social welfare group to advance her agenda, which is political speak for turning campaign cash into a permanent political machine. That $645,000 war chest is more than her predecessor Mike Duggan had left after re-election. It's a massive financial cushion for 2029, or leverage to fund initiatives without begging city council for every dollar. Sheffield didn't just win, she won with money left over, which in politics is the equivalent of finishing a marathon and immediately running another 5 miles just to flex. And so, the question becomes, what do Dan Gilbert, the Pistons, and Samuel L. Jackson expect in return? Because nobody writes 5-figure checks out of pure civic duty. The money talks. Let's talk about what Mary Sheffield actually earns. As Detroit's mayor, she pulls $224,573 annually, one of the highest municipal salaries in Michigan. For context, city council members make around $106,000, and the council president makes about $111,000. Sheffield was earning roughly $104,000 as council president before becoming mayor, so her paycheck more than doubled overnight. She also gets the standard elected official perks: pension contributions, healthcare, city vehicle access, staffed offices, and travel budgets funded by taxpayers. It's not billionaire money, but it's comfortable, especially in a city where median household income is $35,000. But as crazy as it may sound, Sheffield actually doesn't have any public record of business ownership, stock portfolios, or real estate empires. She worked briefly in legal administration and co-pastored at her family's church before entering politics. But those gigs paid modestly. Her primary asset appears to be her Detroit residence, likely a family home or condo on the east side, and liquid savings from years of council salaries. If I were to make a conservative estimate, I would say Sheffield's net worth sits around $200,000 to $400,000. That's solidly middle-class professional tier, not wealthy by national standards. She's not buying vacation properties or flying private. Her wealth is government salary wealth, which means steady but capped unless she pivots into private sector consulting or corporate boards post-politics. But here's the lifestyle shift that matters. Sheffield now operates in rooms where billionaires write checks and developers pitch projects worth hundreds of millions. She doesn't personally have that money, but she controls access to it through zoning approvals, tax abatements, and development subsidies. That's political wealth. The ability to say yes or no to deals that make or break fortunes. And the lifestyle that comes with that power? It's less about designer handbags and more about who you're having lunch with and what gets decided before the public vote even happens. The power couple move. 3 weeks after winning the mayoral race, Mary Sheffield married Ricky Jackson Jr. in December 2025, and the timing is almost too perfect. They kept the engagement private during the campaign, smart, because personal relationships become ammunition for opponents, then announced it after victory was secured. Controlled narrative. Minimal drama. Maximum authenticity. Jackson is a Detroit native and youth sports advocate who works as program manager for Project Play Southeast Michigan, a nonprofit supporting community sports. He's got a background in education and college admissions, which means mission-driven income, not Wall Street money. He's also the brother of WNBA player Ricky Jackson, which ties the family directly into Detroit's sports scene and adds local credibility. As Detroit's first gentleman, Jackson has no official role, but he'll show up at community events, champion youth initiatives, and generally play the supportive spouse who complements the mayor's agenda without overshadowing it. It's the political spouse playbook. Be visible, be likable, stay out of controversy. Financially, the couple keeps it modest. No reports of lavish wedding expenses or luxury purchases. Sheffield didn't own multiple homes before taking office, and her wedding was intimate rather than Instagram-worthy spectacle. The optics are intentional. She's a public servant focused on Detroit, not a celebrity flexing wealth. But to see it from a political angle, the marriage humanizes her. Sheffield goes from ambitious politician to working mother building a family, which softens edges and broadens appeal. It also roots her deeper into Detroit's social fabric, married to a local youth advocate with sports connections, tied to community institutions, embedded in networks that reinforce her hometown champion image. So Sheffield's married to a youth sports manager, living modestly, projecting family values. Great optics, but political lifestyles aren't built on who you marry. They're built on who you dated before the cameras were watching. And Sheffield's ex-boyfriend? He was cashing $18 million in city checks while she held the pen that approved them. The boyfriend who cashed $18 million. Okay, here's where Sheffield's story gets messy. In October 2025, opponents dropped a bomb. Years earlier, Sheffield had dated Brian McKinney, a demolition contractor whose company Gayanga Co. secured approximately $18.45 million in city contracts while she served on city council. And she was voting on those contracts while dating the guy cashing the checks. Critics screamed conflict of interest. Sheffield's response? She disclosed the relationship to the Detroit Ethics Board in 2019 and got an advisory opinion. The city's legal team said since she was a council member, legally required to vote unless a conflict is proven, and the relationship didn't meet the strict definition of domestic partnership, she could vote. Detroit's ethics rules have loopholes you could drive a bulldozer through, and Sheffield navigated them by seeking official guidance and following it. No legal findings, no violations. Just optics that look terrible when summarized in a campaign attack ad. She voted on millions in contracts for her boyfriend's company. Sheffield won anyway with 77% of the vote, which suggests voters either didn't care or trusted her explanation. Then, in her first weeks as mayor, she created a compliance committee and pushed for stronger ethics laws, turning a vulnerability into a reform talking point. Political judo at its finest. But wait, there's more. In 2017, Sheffield voted to approve a $34.5 million public subsidy for the Pistons' downtown move. Critics called it corporate welfare. Sheffield defended it as economic development with community benefits. Then recently, she skipped a council hearing on another Pistons project, but voted for its tax abatement anyway. Then, and this is the kicker, she named Arn Tellem, the Pistons vice chair, who donated over $43,000 to her campaign, as co-chair of her transition team. Let's connect those dots. Tellem gives $43,000. Sheffield votes on Pistons deals worth tens of millions. Tellem helps shape her administration. That's not illegal, but it's exactly the kind of access for money dynamic that makes people cynical about politics. Sheffield's defense? She judges projects on merit, and the Pistons deals bring jobs and tax revenue. Maybe. But the lifestyle reality is this. She's taking money from people whose projects she approves, dating contractors who win city bids, and operating in a system where ethics rules have enough gray area to drive a convoy through. Is it corruption? Legally, no. Is it how power actually works? Absolutely. The real flex is policy. Here's what separates Sheffield from politicians who just cash checks and coast. She actually uses power to reshape systems. On city council, she authored Detroit's inclusionary housing ordinance, requiring 20% of new publicly assisted units to be affordable. She led the HOPE tax exemption for seniors and pushed blight remediation reforms that directly affect property values citywide. As mayor, her first major move was issuing an executive order in January 2026 to overhaul Detroit's property assessment process. Her pitch? Rising home values should create generational wealth for residents, not tax burdens that force displacement. She capped tax hikes and demanded transparency, protecting her political base while addressing real economic anxiety. She's also expanding cash assistance programs for parents, launched a new youth and education department, and personally shows up at ribbon cuttings and school events. Her schedule is packed: meetings, press events, grassroots gatherings, photo ops. Unlike corporate executives whose lifestyle involves private jets and closed-door deals, Sheffield's visible work is city hall, neighborhood tours, and town halls where she walks through crowds chatting with residents. She wears Detroit-themed lapel pins, posts about local sports teams, and projects accessibility. It's intentional branding designed to counterbalance the corporate money funding her campaigns. The message: I take their checks, but I work for you. Whether that's true long-term depends on whose interests win when they conflict. But for now, Sheffield's leveraging mayoral power to push policies that sound progressive while maintaining relationships with donors who expect returns. That balancing act is her entire political lifestyle. The image is the message. Physically, Sheffield is energetic and constantly moving. Work events, campaign stops, neighborhood visits. Even as mayor-elect, she continued council office hours and local site visits, inspecting blighted homes, visiting playgrounds, meeting residents in winter wearing coats and boots rather than designer outfits. When not in public, she's mentioned enjoying Detroit's cultural institutions like art fairs and sports games, spending quiet time with family, attending jazz festivals and college football games with staff or supporters. She dresses formally for city business but opts for casual attire at community events, reinforcing her image as approachable and relatable. These lifestyle choices, open-door events, active local presence, grounded fashion, project her as a people's champion rather than an elite disconnected from constituent struggles. Sheffield projects a forward-looking but grounded persona, often described as energetic, optimistic, and rooted in Detroit's faith and labor traditions. In interviews, she emphasizes accountability and inclusion. On WDET radio, she spoke passionately about ensuring the city's comeback benefits everyone, especially people who've been left out of Detroit's comeback story. She avoids grandiose claims about personal wealth or glamour, instead framing wealth in communal terms. Detroit's rising home values creating shared generational equity rather than individual fortunes. Her lifestyle remains family and community-centric. She routinely highlights standing on the shoulders of past generations of activists, positioning herself as a torchbearer rather than a self-made icon. Public appearances often feature multi-generational families and grassroots advocates rather than elite-only gatherings. At her inauguration, she invited youth leaders and small business owners to speak, reinforcing her commitment to inclusive leadership. Sheffield frequently speaks to children and youth about public service, using a torch-carrying metaphor to inspire future Detroiters. She's been honored with numerous accolades: Crain's Detroit 40 Under 40, Michigan Chronicle's Women of Excellence, NAACP Awards, but leverages those honors to amplify her platform rather than personal prestige. She's known for taking government directly to the people, spearheading public forums, mentoring programs like Detroit Girls of Destiny, and neighborhood initiatives that keep her visible and accessible. Her social media presence celebrates Detroit sports teams, local culture, and community wins, projecting authenticity in an era where political figures often feel manufactured. At her victory celebration, Sheffield invoked her family's legacy and Detroit's promise: "No mountain is too high for us to climb. We will continue to march boldly toward that promise once again." That rhetoric, faith-driven, optimistic, rooted in collective struggle, defines her public persona and lifestyle brand. She's selling hope and competence, not luxury and exclusivity. But sustaining that brand while navigating corporate interests, ethical scrutiny, and policy battles, that's the real work, and it's just beginning. What comes next? So where does Mary Sheffield actually land? She's not wealthy by elite standards. Net worth in the low to mid six figures, built on public salaries, not private enterprise. No multiple properties, no luxury cars, no private jets. Her wedding was modest, her wardrobe professional, her social media grounded in Detroit pride. But she operates where wealth and power intersect. She meets with billionaires, negotiates with corporate executives, commands a $3 million campaign war chest, and left $645,000 unspent. Her mayoral salary puts her in Detroit's top income tier. Her real wealth isn't cash, it's political capital. She controls budgets, approves development deals, shapes tax policy, influences who wins economically in a transforming city. That power attracts donors, opens doors, positions her for long-term influence that could translate into post-political consulting gigs, corporate boards, nonprofit leadership. The $645,000 war chest sets her up perfectly for 2029 re-election. Her family legacy and faith narrative resonate in Detroit's Black community. Her policy record gives her substantive accomplishments to campaign on. But the contradictions remain. She projects modesty while wielding significant power. She hosts park town halls while taking five-figure corporate checks. She pushes affordable housing while voting for development subsidies critics call corporate welfare. She strengthens ethics oversight while navigating donor relationships that expect access. That's modern political life, straddling worlds, balancing constituencies, projecting authenticity within systems designed to favor wealth and influence. Sheffield's mastered it so far, winning with 77% signals broad support, finishing with $645,000, unspent signals financial discipline, appointing ethics committees while maintaining donor ties signals savvy. The real question is whether that balance holds. Detroit's challenges, poverty, blight, inequality, require money Sheffield doesn't personally have. She'll need corporate partners and philanthropic support to deliver on promises, creating dependency on donors who expect returns. Mary Sheffield's lifestyle isn't mansions and yachts. It's navigating power structures, managing perceptions, leveraging relationships, wielding influence in a desperate city. She's not living lavishly, she's living strategically, building a legacy that could sustain influence for decades. And in Detroit, where generational wealth has been systematically extracted from Black communities for a century, that strategic positioning might be the most valuable move of all. Mary Sheffield pulls $225,000, controls a $645,000 war chest, takes checks from billionaires, and runs a city where most people make $35,000. She's not secretly rich, but she's positioned exactly where power and money intersect. Dating contractors, cashing city checks, voting on corporate subsidies, appointing donors to transition teams, all while projecting hometown authenticity. Her net worth is middle class. Her lifestyle is strategic. Her real wealth is access and influence. And she's just getting started. If this shifted how you see political power, hit like and subscribe to Black Status. Drop a comment on whether Sheffield's playing the game brilliantly or just playing it. And share this with someone who thinks politicians are either saints or crooks, because reality is way messier and way more interesting. Catch you next time.